Chapter 1. The Vorak King. The aftermath of the battle against the Vorak Queen had left the world scarred. Cities lay in ruins, their skyscrapers crumbled into piles of debris, their streets stained with the blood of fallen soldiers and civilians. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and burnt metal, and a strange quiet had settled over the survivors. For the first time in days, the constant sounds of battle, the relentless clashing of weapons, the deafening roars of alien beasts, the screams of the dying, had finally ceased. But there was no peace in the silence. The world had been left in ruins, and everyone knew that this victory, however hard fought, was far from complete. Cyrus stood atop the broken remains of what had once been a towering fortress, his face smeared with dirt and blood, his muscles ached with exhaustion, and his mind buzzed with the adrenaline of battle. But his eyes remained sharp, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. His body tensed at every sound, every gust of wind that swept across the barren landscape. After everything they had been through, he knew better than to let his guard down. Around him, the soldiers of humanity were slowly beginning to recover. Those who could still stand were helping the wounded, while others gathered weapons and equipment from the dead. The battlefield was a wasteland of destruction and death, but they had survived. They had fought back the tide of the Vorak invasion, defeating their queen and driving the remaining forces into retreat. For now, they had won. But something in Cyrus's gut told him this wasn't over. The Vorak Queen had been a powerful enemy, one of the most dangerous beings Cyrus had ever faced. Her strength had nearly overwhelmed them, and her dark energy had wreaked havoc on the Earth's defenses. But she wasn't the true threat. Throughout the battle, Cyrus had felt the weight of something far more sinister looming on the horizon, a presence that dwarfed even the Queen's terrible power. And now, in the eerie quiet that followed her defeat, that presence was becoming impossible to ignore. Cyrus's hand tightened around the hilt of his weapon, his knuckles white with tension. He had to remain vigilant. The Vorak were cunning, ruthless creatures, and he had no doubt that they had more tricks up their sleeves. Their queen had been the face of their invasion, but she wasn't the true leader. And if the reports from their intelligence were correct, the king of the Vorak, their ultimate ruler, and the most powerful being in their ranks, was still out there. A cold wind swept across the battlefield, sending a shiver down Cyrus's spine. He looked up at the sky, watching as dark clouds began to gather on the horizon. The weather had been erratic ever since the Vorak invasion began, their presence somehow disrupting the natural order of things, but this felt different. The air was heavy with an oppressive energy, thick with an impending sense of doom. "We need to move," Cyrus muttered under his breath. He turned to Amanda, who stood a few paces behind him, her expression as grim and exhausted as his own. Her uniform was torn and her face was streaked with soot and blood, but her eyes were still bright with determination. Amanda nodded, her gaze fixed on the sky. "You feel it too, don't you?" Cyrus didn't respond right away. He simply stared out at the darkening clouds, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Finally, he spoke. "It's coming." They had all sensed it. Every soldier, every commander, they had all felt the same creeping dread since the Queen's defeat. The Vorak King was on his way, and when he arrived, the real battle would begin. The wind picked up, howling across the wasteland like the distant wail of some terrible beast. Dust and debris swirled through the air, stinging their eyes and biting at their skin. Cyrus could hear the soldiers murmuring among themselves, their voices filled with uncertainty and fear. They had barely survived the Queen's onslaught. How could they possibly hope to stand against the king? As if in answer to their unspoken question, the ground suddenly shook beneath their feet, a deep rumble that sent ripples through the earth. It wasn't an earthquake. It wasn't anything natural. This was something else, something far worse. "Cyrus," Amanda called out, her voice laced with urgency. She pointed to the horizon, where the clouds were growing darker by the second, swirling together in a massive vortex of black and gray. Bolts of lightning crackled within the storm, illuminating the sky with flashes of white and purple. Cyrus felt his heart begin to race, his muscles tensing as adrenaline surged through him once more. He had seen storms like this before, but only in the wake of the Vorak. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was a warning, a sign of what was to come. Without another word, Cyrus grabbed his communicator and barked orders into it. All units, prepare for immediate mobilization. We've got incoming. The soldiers scrambled into action, gathering their weapons and forming defensive positions. Cyrus could see the fear in their eyes, but they moved with purpose, their training taking over as they readied themselves for whatever was coming. The Vorak King would not catch them off guard. But even as they prepared, Cyrus knew in his heart that it wouldn't be enough. The Vorak King was unlike anything they had ever faced. He wasn't just a ruler, he was a force of nature, a being of immense power and cruelty. The stories told about him were the stuff of nightmares, and if even half of them were true, they were all in grave danger. The ground shook again, this time more violently, as if something massive was moving beneath the surface. The soldiers steadied themselves, their weapons trained on the horizon, waiting for the first sign of the enemy. And then, from the heart of the storm, a massive figure began to emerge. Cyrus's breath caught in his throat as he watched the creature take shape, its form slowly becoming visible through the swirling clouds. It was enormous, easily the size of a skyscraper, with hulking limbs and a body that seemed to pulse with dark energy. Its skin was a deep, mottled black, streaked with veins of glowing red that pulsed in time with the storm. The Vorak King. He towered over the battlefield, his presence casting a long, dark shadow over the land. His eyes burned with a malevolent red glow, and as he moved, the very earth seemed to tremble beneath him. His massive wings unfurled behind him, stretching out like the sails of some ancient, terrible ship. Cyrus felt a wave of terror wash over him, his heart pounding in his chest. This was no ordinary enemy. This was a god of destruction, a being whose power eclipsed anything they had ever faced before. "Open fire!" Cyrus shouted, his voice cutting through the roar of the storm. The soldiers unleashed a barrage of gunfire, rockets, and energy blasts, their weapons lighting up the darkening sky. But the Vorak King didn't even flinch. The attacks struck his massive body, but they did nothing to slow him down. It was as if he were impervious to their weapons, his body absorbing the energy like it was nothing more than a gentle breeze. With a deafening roar, the Vorak King raised one of his massive arms and swung it down toward the battlefield. The ground exploded beneath the impact, sending shockwaves rippling through the ranks of soldiers. Men and women were thrown into the air, their bodies tumbling like ragdolls before crashing back to the ground. Cyrus barely managed to stay on his feet, his eyes wide with horror as the king continued his assault. This wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. "We can't stop him," Amanda shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "He's too strong." Cyrus clenched his fists, his mind racing as he tried to think of a solution. There had to be a way to stop him. There had to be. But even as he searched for answers, the truth was becoming painfully clear. They were outmatched. The Vorak King was far more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. Their weapons were useless against him, their strategies futile. He was a force of destruction, and they were nothing more than ants beneath his feet. The ground shook once more as the king unleashed another devastating attack, sending a massive shockwave through the battlefield. The soldiers were thrown back once again, their defenses crumbling under the sheer force of the assault. Cyrus felt a wave of despair wash over him. This was it. This was the end. They had fought so hard, come so far, but it was all for nothing. The Vorak King was unstoppable. And then, in the midst of the chaos, a new sound echoed across the battlefield. It was a deep, resonant hum, unlike anything Cyrus had ever heard before. It seemed to cut through the noise of battle, filling the air with a strange, calming energy. Cyrus turned toward the source of the sound, his eyes widening in shock. A figure was descending from the sky, bathed in a brilliant golden light. Its form was humanoid, but there was something otherworldly about it, something ancient and powerful. As it touched down on the battlefield, the very air seemed to hum with energy, and the Vorak King paused, his massive head turning toward the newcomer. Cyrus's heart raced as he realized who or what had arrived: the Guardian. The stories had always spoken of a myth, a being of immense power that had existed since the dawn of time, sworn to protect humanity in its darkest hour. Cyrus had never truly believed the legends, but now, Standing before him was proof that they were real. The Guardian's golden eyes locked onto the Vorak King, and for the first time, the king hesitated. Cyrus didn't know what was about to happen, but he could feel the tide of the battle shifting. The Guardian was here, and with it came hope. The final battle was about to begin. Chapter 2. The Wrath of the King. The sky crackled with dark energy, swirling black clouds casting ominous shadows over the ruined battlefield. The moment stretched on for what seemed like an eternity. Time itself felt frozen, with the massive Vorak King standing like a dark god, towering over the earth, his red eyes locked onto the glowing figure of the Guardian. Cyrus's heart pounded in his chest, the air thick with tension as both sides waited. The soldiers were barely holding their ground, their faces bloodied and bruised, weapons hanging loosely in their hands. They had faced an enemy so far beyond their strength that hope had been but a flicker on the edge of despair. Yet now, the arrival of the Guardian had sparked something within them, a sliver of belief, a chance for survival. Cyrus, though battle-hardened, had never seen anything like the Guardian before. Its presence radiated power, a pulsing energy that seemed to calm the devastation around it. Its form was humanoid, but the light that surrounded it was otherworldly, shimmering in hues of gold and silver. The Vorak King, who had unleashed unparalleled destruction only moments ago, had paused in its path, watching the new arrival with an unreadable gaze. The Guardian raised one hand toward the sky, and a hum of energy filled the air. Lightning crackled in the storm clouds above, but it was different from the chaotic flashes that had preceded it. This was controlled, directed. The energy responded to the Guardian's will, and the soldiers around Cyrus could only watch in awe. Without warning, the Guardian unleashed a beam of pure energy, shooting from its hand like a bolt of lightning. It struck the Vorak King square in the chest, causing the massive creature to stagger backward for the first time. The impact rippled through the air, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The soldiers cheered, their voices rising in unison. Finally, they had seen the mighty Vorak King flinch. But the celebration was short-lived. The Vorak King let out a guttural roar, the sound reverberating through the earth like an earthquake. His eyes glowed even brighter, burning with rage. He spread his enormous wings wide, dark energy crackling around him, and with one swift movement he swung his colossal arm down toward the Guardian. The Guardian barely moved, stepping aside in a blur of speed just as the king's arm smashed into the ground where it had been standing. The earth erupted in a massive shockwave, sending chunks of rock and debris flying through the air. Soldiers were thrown off their feet, struggling to shield themselves from the blast. Cyrus braced himself, ducking behind a crumbled wall for cover. His ears rang from the impact, and dust filled his lungs, making it hard to breathe. He glanced around, trying to catch a glimpse of the battle unfolding between the two titans. Through the haze of dust and smoke, he saw them, locked in combat, their blows shaking the very foundations of the world. The Vorak King swung with devastating power, his massive claws slashing through the air with the force of a hurricane. But the Guardian was quick, darting around the king's attacks with an agility that seemed impossible for a being of its size. Each time the king's claws struck, they met only air or shattered the landscape around them. But the Guardian wasn't just dodging. Each time it evaded an attack, it countered with its own. Beams of energy shot from its hands, striking the king with precision. The king grunted with each hit, the blasts pushing him back step by step. It was a battle of gods, and for the first time since the invasion began, Cyrus dared to hope that they might stand a chance. The soldiers, still battered and bruised from their earlier battles, began to rally. Inspired by the Guardian's strength, they formed ranks again, organizing themselves with renewed vigor. Cyrus could hear the commanders barking orders, the sound of soldiers reloading their weapons and preparing for whatever might come next. But Cyrus knew better than to get caught up in the moment. This fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Vorak King was no ordinary foe. His power was beyond anything they had encountered, and despite the Guardian's efforts, the king wasn't going down easily. The king let out another roar, this time raising both of his arms. The air around him shimmered with dark energy, and the sky above twisted and churned. Cyrus felt the temperature drop, a biting cold seeping into his bones. The soldiers' breath became visible in the freezing air as they watched in horror. From the swirling clouds above, massive pillars of dark energy began to descend, crashing into the earth like meteors. They struck with explosive force, sending shockwaves through the ground. The soldiers scrambled for cover, their defensive lines scattered by the sheer power of the blasts. Cyrus dove behind a fallen piece of debris just as one of the pillars smashed into the ground nearby, the explosion throwing him off balance. His ears rang and his vision blurred, but he managed to stay on his feet. He watched as the Guardian leaped into the air, dodging the dark energy blasts with incredible speed. But the king wasn't done. His wings spread wide once more, and with a powerful thrust, he launched himself into the sky. The ground shook as he took off, his massive form soaring upward toward the swirling storm clouds. For a moment, everything went still. The wind stopped, the soldiers froze, and even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a deafening roar, the king dove down from the sky, his body engulfed in dark energy. He aimed straight for the Guardian, his massive form a black blur of destruction. The impact was catastrophic. The earth shook with the force of 1,000 earthquakes as the Vorak King collided with the Guardian. The ground beneath them cracked and split apart, massive fissures opening up as the energy from their clash tore through the battlefield. Soldiers were thrown into the air, their bodies tossed like rag dolls as the shock wave ripped through their ranks. Cyrus was thrown back, his body slamming into the remains of a building. Pain shot through his limbs, and for a moment he struggled to breathe. He lay there, dazed and disoriented, as the world around him seemed to collapse. When the dust finally settled, Cyrus forced himself to his feet, his legs shaking beneath him. His body ached from the impact, but he ignored the pain, his eyes fixed on the center of the battlefield. The Vorak King stood tall, his massive form towering over the ruined landscape. His body was bruised and battered, but he still stood, his red eyes glowing with fury. The Guardian lay on the ground before him, motionless. A cold chill settled over the battlefield as the reality of the situation sank in. The Guardian had been defeated. Cyrus's heart sank. The soldiers around him stared in disbelief, their weapons hanging uselessly at their sides. Their last hope, the being they had believed could save them, lay broken at the feet of the Vorak King. For a moment, it felt as though all was lost. The Vorak King had won. Humanity had no more defenders left. But just as despair began to take hold, a faint glow began to emanate from the Guardian's body. It was weak at first, barely noticeable in the chaos of the battlefield, but it grew stronger with each passing second. The Guardian wasn't finished. With a sudden burst of light, the Guardian rose from the ground, its golden aura flaring to life once more. The soldiers gasped in awe as the being of light stood tall, its body radiating power. The Vorak King let out a growl, but the Guardian didn't back down. This time, the Guardian attacked with renewed fury. It moved faster than before, its strikes more precise, more powerful. Energy beams shot from its hands, each one aimed with deadly accuracy at the king's weak points. The king roared in frustration, lashing out with his massive claws, but the Guardian was always one step ahead. The battle raged on, both titans locked in a deadly dance of power and destruction. But now, it was clear, the Guardian wasn't just holding its own. It was winning. Cyrus could hardly believe his eyes. The soldiers around him began to cheer again, their spirits lifted by the sight of their champion standing tall. For the first time, it seemed as though they might actually have a chance. But Cyrus knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Vorak King was a cunning opponent, and he wouldn't go down easily. As the battle reached its climax, the sky above them began to change. The swirling clouds that had hung over the battlefield for so long started to part, revealing a new, darker presence above. Cyrus's breath caught in his throat as he looked up, his heart pounding in his chest. Another figure was descending from the sky, its body cloaked in darkness, its eyes burning with an unnatural light. The Vorak Prince had arrived. Chapter 3. The Descent of the Prince. The wind shifted, carrying with it a new scent, something that filled the air with an overwhelming sense of dread. The sky had already been dark, but now it seemed to fold in on itself, as though reality was bending under the weight of an unseen force. High above, the swirling clouds parted like curtains, revealing a new entity. Unlike the Vorak King, this figure descended with eerie silence, no roars or war cries, just an ominous presence that made the air vibrate with tension. Cyrus stood frozen, his eyes wide in disbelief. He had thought the battle against the Vorak King was the peak of their struggle, that the Guardian's intervention would turn the tide for good. But this new figure descending from the sky was something else entirely. There was no mistaking the aura that radiated from it, darker and more malevolent than anything he had ever felt. This creature wasn't just another warrior of the Vorak species, it was something far more dangerous. The soldiers around Cyrus began to murmur, their renewed hope slipping through their fingers like sand. They had just begun to rally around the Guardian, inspired by its seeming comeback against the king. But this new arrival threatened to snuff out whatever flicker of hope remained. The figure landed softly on the battlefield, the ground rippling beneath its feet as if the very earth recoiled from its presence. As it straightened, its full form came into view. It was tall, its body sleek and muscular, yet there was a serpentine grace to the way it moved. Its skin was a deep obsidian, darker than the night itself, with veins of silver pulsing beneath the surface like liquid mercury. Its eyes, however, were the most unsettling. They glowed with an intense violet hue, burning with an intelligence that chilled Cyrus to his core. This was not a mindless beast like the others they had faced. This creature was calculating, and every fiber of its being screamed danger. For a moment, everything was still. The battlefield, once filled with the sounds of war, seemed to hold its breath. The Guardian, still glowing faintly from its recent resurgence, stood across from the newcomer, its golden eyes fixed on the prince. The Vorak King, bruised and battered from his fight with the Guardian, let out a low growl. He took a step back, almost as if he were yielding the fight to the new arrival. Cyrus's blood ran cold at the realization. Even the king feared this creature. The prince of the Vorak surveyed the battlefield with a casual arrogance, his gaze flicking between the Guardian, the Vorak King, and the scattered remnants of the human army. Then, slowly, he spoke. His voice was soft but carried an unnatural weight, each word reverberating through the air as though the world itself was forced to listen. "You've done well, Guardian. Better than I expected, in fact," the prince said, his tone almost conversational. "But this ends now. The game has gone on long enough." Without warning, the prince moved. His speed was terrifying, a blur of motion that defied logic. One moment he stood across the battlefield, and in the next he was in front of the Guardian, his fist connecting with a thunderous crack. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, and the Guardian was thrown backward, skidding across the shattered earth. Cyrus barely had time to react. The soldiers around him gasped, stumbling backward as the sheer force of the attack rattled through their bones. The Guardian, which had so valiantly stood against the Vorak King, now struggled to rise. Its golden aura flickered like a dying flame, and for the first time, Cyrus saw what could only be described as fear in the being's expression. The prince didn't give the Guardian a chance to recover. He was relentless, his movements precise and brutal. Every strike was calculated. Every attack aimed to exploit the Guardian's weaknesses. The Guardian tried to fight back, but it was clear that it was outmatched. The prince was faster, stronger, and far more experienced. Cyrus watched in horror as the battle unfolded. He had seen countless horrors since the Vorak invasion began. The death of millions, the destruction of cities, the hopelessness of their fight against a superior enemy. But this was different. This felt like the end. The prince slammed the Guardian into the ground, his claws digging into its chest as he pinned it down. The Guardian struggled, its golden light dimming with each passing second. "You were never meant to defeat us," the prince hissed, his violet eyes glowing brighter. "You are a relic of a forgotten age, a guardian of a world that no longer exists. This era belongs to the Vorak." With a final, savage twist, the prince drove his claws deeper into the Guardian's chest, and the golden light that had once burned so brightly flickered out. The Guardian's body went limp, and a silence fell over the battlefield. Cyrus couldn't breathe. He felt as though the air had been sucked from his lungs, his body frozen in disbelief. The soldiers around him stood in stunned silence, their faces pale and drawn. They had just witnessed their last hope fall. The prince stood, towering over the guardian's lifeless form. He glanced down at the body with a look of mild disappointment, as though the fight hadn't been worth his time. Then, without another word, he turned his gaze toward the human forces. Cyrus felt the weight of the prince's gaze settle on him, and for a moment it was as though he were the only person on the battlefield. The prince's eyes bored into him, those violet orbs filled with malice and something else, curiosity. "You," the prince said, his voice carrying across the battlefield, "you're the one who helped summon the guardian, aren't you?" Cyrus couldn't speak. His throat had gone dry, his body frozen in place. The prince took a step toward him, and Cyrus's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to run, to hide, but his legs wouldn't obey him. The prince closed the distance between them with terrifying speed, standing before Cyrus in the blink of an eye. "You and your kind have proven amusing," the prince said, tilting his head as he studied Cyrus. "But it's time to end this farce." Cyrus braced himself, expecting the final blow, but before the prince could strike, something changed. The air shifted again, but this time it was different. There was a new presence, something far more ancient and powerful than anything Cyrus had felt before. The ground beneath them trembled, and the air became thick with energy. Cyrus could feel it in his bones. Something, or someone, was coming. The prince frowned, his eyes narrowing as he glanced around, searching for the source of the disturbance. "What is this?" he muttered, more to himself than to Cyrus. Then, from the horizon, a massive surge of energy erupted. A pillar of light shot into the sky, its brilliance blinding. The ground cracked and split apart as the energy spread, and Cyrus could hear the distant sounds of battle. No, it wasn't battle. It was something else, something older, something far beyond the scope of anything they had encountered before. The prince took a step back, his confidence faltering for the first time. "No," he whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It can't be." From the blinding light, figures began to emerge. At first, they were mere silhouettes, their forms barely distinguishable against the brightness. But as they stepped forward, their features became clear. They were guardians, not just one, but an entire legion of them. Each one radiated power, their golden auras blazing like suns. They moved with purpose, their eyes fixed on the prince. Cyrus's heart raced. He had no idea where these guardians had come from or why they had arrived now, but he didn't care. All that mattered was that they were here, and they were standing between the prince and humanity. The prince snarled, his violet eyes glowing with fury. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "You may have delayed the inevitable, but you cannot stop it. The Vorak will return, and when they do, your world will fall." With a final, furious glance at Cyrus, the prince turned and vanished into the shadows, his form disappearing into the darkness. The guardians stood silently, watching as the prince fled. Then, as one, they turned their gaze toward Cyrus. "You have fought bravely," one of them said, their voice calm and soothing. "But this is only the beginning." Cyrus swallowed hard, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The guardian's eyes glowed softly. The prince was not the true threat. The real danger lies ahead. The Vorak King may have been defeated, but the chosen one, the Vorak Prince's heir, has yet to rise. And when he does, he will bring with him the full might of the Vorak Empire. Cyrus felt a chill run down his spine. The battle against the Vorak wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. Chapter 4. The Awakening of the Heir. The air had turned cold, heavy with the weight of silence, as the guardians surrounded Cyrus and the battered remains of the human forces. The Vorak prince had retreated, his threat hanging over them like a dark cloud, but the victory was hollow. Every soldier, every survivor who stood in that blood-soaked battlefield knew the truth. The battle was far from over. And worse still, the real nightmare had yet to begin. The guardians, magnificent and imposing, surveyed the destruction around them. Their golden eyes reflected the devastation of Earth's last defenses, the once proud cities now reduced to rubble, smoke still rising from the remnants of human civilization. Despite their immense power, even they seemed to sense the magnitude of the challenge they now faced. Cyrus stood in the middle of the gathering, his breath coming in shallow gasps as he tried to comprehend the events that had just unfolded. The defeat of the Vorak King had felt like the end of a long, arduous nightmare. But with the prince's ominous warning still fresh in his mind, the guardian's words now echoed with even greater significance. The true danger was still on its way. The heir, the chosen one of the Vorak, the being that would surpass them all. One of the guardians, a towering figure with glowing white runes carved into his golden skin, stepped forward. His voice was a deep rumble, commanding yet measured. The prince spoke of the heir, a Vorak unlike any we have faced before. He is their greatest creation, their final evolution, and he is the one who will lead their kind to dominate all existence. The words struck hard, and the soldiers that remained shifted uncomfortably. Cyrus could see the weight of despair in their eyes. These were men and women who had already faced hell on earth, and yet they were being told that the worst was yet to come. How could anyone prepare for such an enemy? Cyrus swallowed his fear, forcing himself to ask the question gnawing at the edges of his mind. Who is the heir? His voice trembled, though he tried to hide it. How is he different from the Vorak king and prince? The guardian's gaze settled on Cyrus, and for a moment, there was an almost mournful expression in those ancient glowing eyes. The heir is the culmination of the Vorak's quest for perfection. They have bred warriors for centuries, each generation stronger, more intelligent, more ruthless than the last. The king was their leader, the prince their most cunning weapon, but the heir. The guardian paused, his expression darkening. The heir was bred for one purpose, to annihilate. He is not merely a warrior or a strategist. He is a living embodiment of the Vorak's hatred for all other life. His power will surpass anything we have ever known, and if he awakens, there will be no stopping him. A shiver ran through Cyrus, and he clenched his fists at his sides, trying to suppress the rising dread. The idea of facing something worse than the king or prince seemed impossible, and yet the guardian spoke of the heir as if he were an inevitability, a doom that could not be avoided. Then what do we do? Cyrus asked, his voice barely a whisper. How can we prepare for this? Before the guardian could answer, a tremor shook the ground beneath them. It started as a low rumble, but soon grew in intensity, causing cracks to spiderweb through the earth. The soldiers cried out in alarm, scrambling to keep their footing as the ground heaved beneath their feet. The guardians remained still, their glowing eyes scanning the horizon with grim determination. Cyrus turned his gaze skyward, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, nothing seemed out of place. Just the swirling clouds of smoke and ash that had lingered since the last battle. But then he saw it. High above, cutting through the stormy skies like a blade, a vast, dark shape descended. It was enormous, its sheer size blotting out the light, casting a shadow over the already devastated landscape. The soldiers pointed and shouted, panic rising as the colossal shape drew closer. It was a Vorak warship, unlike any they had encountered before. Its sleek, obsidian hull gleamed with an unnatural sheen, and strange symbols glowed along its surface, pulsing with eerie light. But this wasn't just another ship bringing more troops. No, this was something else. It's him, the guardian whispered, his voice filled with awe and fear. The heir has come. The word sent a wave of terror through the ranks. The heir, the chosen one of the Vorak, the creature bred to destroy entire worlds, was here, and his arrival signaled the end of everything they had fought to protect. The massive warship touched down with a deafening crash, its landing sending shockwaves rippling across the battlefield. The soldiers were thrown to the ground, their weapons clattering from their hands as the earth buckled beneath them. Cyrus managed to stay on his feet, though just barely, his eyes locked on the ship as its immense doors began to open. From the darkness within, a single figure emerged. At first glance, he appeared humanoid, tall, with broad shoulders and a regal bearing. But there was an undeniable otherworldliness to him. His skin was black as night, his eyes glowing with the same violet hue as the prince's, though far more intense. He moved with a grace that belied his enormous power, each step deliberate and controlled. Cyrus felt his heart stop as the heir stepped fully into the light. He was beautiful in a terrifying way, his features sharp and flawless, but there was no warmth or humanity in his gaze. His armor, sleek and polished, seemed to pulse with energy, and the air around him crackled with an unseen force. The heir surveyed the battlefield, his expression cold and indifferent. To him, the devastation and death that surrounded him were meaningless, a mere inconvenience in his pursuit of ultimate victory. For a long, agonizing moment, no one moved. The soldiers stared in stunned silence, too terrified to even raise their weapons. The guardians, too, stood motionless, their glowing eyes locked on the air, as if they were waiting for something, some signal that would tell them how to proceed. Then, without warning, the heir raised his hand. A surge of energy exploded from his outstretched palm, a brilliant beam of violet light that shot across the battlefield with blinding speed. It struck the closest guardian, the one who had spoken to Cyrus, and the being was instantly vaporized. His golden aura flared brightly for a brief moment, then vanished, leaving nothing but a smoldering crater where he had stood. The other guardians reacted immediately, their golden auras flaring to life as they charged at the heir. But they were too slow. The heir moved with lightning speed, dodging their attacks with ease. His movements were precise and fluid, as though he were playing with them. He struck again and again, each blow landing with devastating force. And within moments, 2 more guardians had fallen, their bodies reduced to ash by the heir's overwhelming power. Cyrus watched in horror as the battle unfolded before him. The guardians, the ancient protectors of humanity, were being slaughtered like insects. Their golden light, once a beacon of hope, was now being snuffed out one by one. In the chaos, Cyrus realized that there was only one option left. The heir was too powerful for them to face head-on. They needed help. More than the guardians, more than Cyrus or any human could offer. They needed someone or something that could stand against the Vorak's ultimate weapon. He turned and sprinted toward the command center, his heart pounding in his chest. There was only one chance left, one last hope that might save them from total annihilation. He had to call for reinforcements, the Guardians' last resort, a being even older than the Vorak themselves. The only question was whether they would reach him in time. Because as the heir continued his rampage, Cyrus knew one thing with absolute certainty. If they failed, humanity would fall. The heir would not stop until every last trace of life on Earth had been wiped out. Chapter 5. The Shattered Defenses. The atmosphere was thick with despair, a palpable weight that settled over the devastated remnants of humanity. The arrival of the heir, the ultimate weapon of the Vorak, had shaken the foundations of hope. The Guardians had been their last line of defense, their golden light believed to be indomitable. Yet here they lay, obliterated by a force so powerful it seemed to laugh in the face of all resistance. Cyrus ran through the rubble-strewn landscape, his mind racing faster than his feet. He could still hear the echoes of the battle behind him, the horrifying destruction of everything they had fought for. The shrieks of the wounded soldiers and the heavy crashes of collapsing structures reverberated through the air. But Cyrus knew, deep down, that the most frightening sound of all was the eerie silence that followed in the wake of the heir's power. The command center was little more than a fortified bunker now, barely holding together after the numerous assaults it had endured. Soldiers rushed to and fro, attending to the injured or reinforcing weak spots in the structure, though their efforts felt futile against the impending doom. Cyrus pushed through them, his eyes wild with determination. Inside, a few officers still monitored the situation, their faces grim as they watched the screens showing live footage of the battlefield. They had witnessed the Guardians fall, and now there was only the heir, a dark figure of destruction moving effortlessly through the remnants of their forces, cutting down anyone who dared oppose him. Cyrus slammed his hands down on the central console, drawing the attention of the commanding officer, Major Walker. "We need to activate the contingency protocol," Cyrus said, breathless. Walker stared at him, his face drawn and weary. "Contingency protocol? What are you talking about?" "There's nothing left, Cyrus. The Guardians are gone. Our defenses have been obliterated. We have nothing to fight this thing with." Cyrus shook his head, his eyes blazing with a mixture of desperation and resolve. "You're wrong. There's one more option. We need to call in the ancients." The room fell silent at his words. The ancients, a myth, a legend that had been passed down through the Guardians' teachings, but never fully understood. They were said to be the oldest beings in existence, predating even the Vorak, their power beyond anything humanity could comprehend. The Guardians had never needed to summon them before, until now. Walker narrowed his eyes. The ancients? You're suggesting we rely on a fairy tale? Cyrus, we don't even know if they exist. And even if they do, how do we reach them? The Guardians were our link to that world, and now they're gone. Cyrus leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. The Guardians may be gone, but they left behind a fail-safe, a way to reach the ancients in case of absolute catastrophe. This is the catastrophe, Major. If we don't try, we're all dead. Walker studied him for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a crushing burden. Finally, he nodded. Do it. Cyrus didn't waste any time. He moved to the far end of the command center, where a small, unassuming terminal sat unused. It was old, outdated by modern military standards, but Cyrus knew it held the key to their survival. He entered a series of codes, his fingers trembling slightly as he input the last of the sequence. The terminal hummed to life, its ancient mechanisms whirring as it accessed a hidden database. The screen flickered for a moment before displaying a series of symbols, the language of the Guardians. Cyrus quickly translated the symbols in his mind, his heart racing as the final message appeared, summoning protocol engaged. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shake, a low rumble that sent tremors through the entire base. The lights flickered, and an unnatural wind seemed to stir the air, carrying with it the faint whisper of voices. The officers around Cyrus exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what they were witnessing. Outside, the sky began to darken, the clouds swirling in unnatural patterns. The soldiers who had been fighting on the front lines paused in confusion, staring up at the heavens as the very atmosphere seemed to warp and twist. The heir, too, halted his assault, his violet eyes narrowing as he sensed the shift in the air. A massive tear appeared in the sky, a rift in the fabric of reality itself. From the tear emerged a brilliant light, blinding in its intensity. The soldiers shielded their eyes, their hearts pounding with fear and awe. The light grew brighter, expanding until it consumed the entire horizon, and then from within the light, figures began to emerge. The ancients had arrived. There were 5 of them, each more imposing than the last. Their forms were humanoid, but they radiated a power that was almost too overwhelming to comprehend. Their skin shimmered with colors that seemed to shift and change with every movement, their eyes glowing with the light of stars. They floated above the battlefield, their presence alone causing the air to hum with energy. The soldiers stared in stunned silence, unable to process what they were seeing. The ancients had always been a myth, a story told to children. But now, here they were, standing before them in all their glory. Cyrus watched them with a mixture of awe and relief. This was their last hope, their final chance to turn the tide of the battle. The heir, however, did not seem impressed. He watched the ancients with cold detachment, his violet eyes flickering with contempt. He raised his hand, preparing to unleash another devastating attack, but before he could strike, one of the ancients stepped forward. The ancient's voice boomed across the battlefield, deep and resonant, carrying with it the weight of millennia. "You have brought destruction upon this world," the ancient said, his eyes locked on the heir, "but your reign of terror ends now." With a wave of his hand, the ancient sent a surge of energy hurtling toward the heir. The attack struck with incredible force, causing the ground to shake and the air to crackle with electricity. For a moment, it seemed as though the heir had been defeated, his form engulfed in the blinding light of the attack. But then, from within the explosion, the heir emerged, unscathed. Cyrus's heart sank as he watched the heir step forward, his expression unchanged. The attack that had been powerful enough to level mountains had done nothing. The heir raised his hand once more, and with a flick of his wrist, sent a shockwave of energy back at the ancients. The force of the blast was staggering. The ancients were thrown back, their shimmering forms flickering as they struggled to maintain their composure. The soldiers gasped in horror. If the ancients couldn't defeat the heir, then what hope did they have? But the ancients were not so easily defeated. They regrouped quickly, their forms solidifying as they prepared for another attack. This time, they moved in unison, their combined power creating a massive energy field that enveloped the air. For the first time since his arrival, the air hesitated. The energy field pulsed with an intensity that even he could not ignore. He struggled against it, his form flickering as the field tightened around him, but the ancients pressed forward, determined to contain him. Cyrus watched in breathless anticipation as the air's movements grew more frantic. The energy field was working. The air was being contained. But just as hope began to swell within him, something changed. The air's violet eyes blazed with fury, and with a roar that shook the heavens, he unleashed a surge of power unlike anything they had ever seen. The energy field shattered, the ancients were thrown back once more, and the air stood tall, his power radiating from him like a beacon of death. Cyrus's heart sank. Even the ancients, with all their power, were no match for the heir. But then, from the sky, a new figure appeared. This one was different from the ancients, smaller, more humanoid in appearance, but with an aura of power that surpassed even theirs. His skin was dark as night, his eyes glowing with the light of stars, and in his hand he held a weapon that pulsed with ancient energy. The soldiers stared in awe as the new figure descended, his presence causing the very air to hum with energy. The ancients, too, seemed to recognize him, their expressions filled with a mixture of awe and fear. Cyrus's breath caught in his throat as he realized who this newcomer was. The Guardian King had arrived, and with him, the final battle for Earth would begin. Chapter 6. The Reckoning. The sky above had turned a deep shade of indigo, swirling with dark clouds that seemed to pulse in time with the frenetic energy crackling in the air. As the Guardian King hovered above the battlefield, the presence of his power swept through the atmosphere like a gale-force wind, invigorating the soldiers below. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered back to life in their hearts, but a sense of impending doom loomed just as heavily. The air, still standing defiantly amidst the remnants of the shattered energy field, locked his piercing violet gaze on the Guardian King. A low growl rumbled from the depths of his throat, echoing through the desolation like a death knell. The ground trembled beneath the weight of their confrontation, as if the very earth itself understood the stakes. Cyrus stood at the forefront of the chaos, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Relief washed over him at the sight of the Guardian King, a figure he had only heard about in whispered legends. The tales spoke of his indomitable strength and wisdom, the protector of the innocent and the last bastion against malevolence. But with that relief came the sobering reality that they were not just facing an enemy. They were up against a being born of darkness, one who could decimate their ranks with the flick of his wrist. The Guardian King descended slowly, his dark form framed by flashes of brilliant light that flickered like fireflies in the night. As he landed, the very ground seemed to bow beneath him, and the soldiers felt a surge of energy course through their veins. Cyrus could see the doubt in their eyes slowly transform into a fierce determination. They would fight for their home, for each other, and for the world they had nearly lost. "Stand firm," the Guardian King commanded, his voice a rich timbre that resonated in the air, reaching even the corners of the command center. The soldiers straightened, a sense of unity bonding them, each one prepared to face whatever horrors lay ahead. This is not just a battle, it is a reckoning. The heir will not just come for us, but for every being on this planet. We must show him that we stand as one. Cyrus felt a swell of pride as he joined the ranks beside his fellow soldiers. The Guardian King's presence was galvanizing. It reminded them that they were not alone. They had allies, the ancients, the Guardians, and now the Guardian King himself. Together, they might have a chance. The air let out a primal roar, a sound that sent chills racing down Cyrus's spine. The creature lunged forward, a blur of motion and malice, and the ground erupted beneath him as he struck. A shockwave rippled through the air, forcing Cyrus and the others to brace themselves against the force of the attack. But the Guardian King was faster, and with a flick of his wrist, he conjured a barrier of shimmering energy that absorbed the air's assault. The impact echoed through the battlefield, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze as the two titans faced off. The air crackled with tension, a stark reminder of the devastation that would unfold if either one faltered. The Guardian King's eyes glinted with an ancient wisdom, and he unleashed a pulse of energy that rippled outward, sending a shockwave of power that resonated through the ranks of soldiers. The heir staggered but quickly regained his footing, eyes narrowing with rage. He lunged again, this time aiming for the soldiers who stood behind the Guardian King. A horde of shadowy tendrils erupted from his form, snaking through the air like serpents hungry for flesh. The soldiers screamed, scrambling to evade the deadly assault. Cyrus grabbed the arm of a nearby comrade, pulling him to safety, just as a tendril sliced through the space they had just occupied. "Focus your fire," the Guardian King commanded, his voice booming with authority. "Protect each other." Cyrus joined the fray, adrenaline surging through his veins as he aimed his weapon at the heir. The soldiers, bolstered by the Guardian King's presence, began to unleash a barrage of energy blasts toward the monstrous creature. Each shot was a testament to their defiance, a rallying cry against the darkness that sought to consume them. The heir snarled, his features twisting in rage as the energy blasts struck him, creating bursts of light that illuminated the battlefield. Yet he remained unbroken, a relentless force of nature. With a growl, he countered, unleashing a wave of dark energy that knocked several soldiers off their feet. Their cries of anguish echoed in Cyrus's ears, but he couldn't let despair take hold. He couldn't afford to lose hope now. "Regroup," Cyrus shouted, waving his arms to rally the remaining soldiers. "We need to stick together." Just then, the ancients floated above, their forms shimmering with an otherworldly light. They had been observing the battle, waiting for the opportune moment to join the fight. The lead ancient raised his arms, and a storm of luminous energy swirled around him, coalescing into a massive orb of light. With a commanding gesture, he sent it hurtling toward the air, a beacon of hope piercing through the darkness. The heir turned just in time to see the orb approaching. He reacted instinctively, raising a hand to deflect it, but the force was immense. The orb collided with him, exploding in a blinding flash that lit up the night sky. Cyrus shielded his eyes, heart racing as he hoped against hope that this would be the strike to turn the tide. But as the light faded, the heir emerged unscathed, fury etched across his monstrous features. "You think you can stop me with your pathetic tricks?" he roared, his voice reverberating like thunder. "I am the darkness that consumes worlds." The Guardian King stepped forward, unwavering in his determination. "You may be darkness, but we are the light that will dispel you. You will not take this world." The heir's laughter was chilling, a sound devoid of humanity. "Light? You think light can save you? You are fools to believe in such trivialities." Without warning, the heir unleashed another wave of energy, a torrent of darkness that surged toward the Guardian King and the soldiers. The ground shook beneath them as they scrambled to evade the lethal blast. But the Guardian King stood firm, raising a barrier of radiant light that clashed against the encroaching darkness. The collision sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield, and Cyrus felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. The two forces struggled, darkness and light locked in a dance of destruction. Cyrus could see the strain on the Guardian King's face, the effort it took to contain the heir's malevolence. The air was thick with tension, and Cyrus knew they were teetering on the edge of annihilation. "We need to find a way to weaken him," Cyrus shouted to the others, desperation creeping into his voice. "If we can disrupt his focus, we might stand a chance." The soldiers nodded, determination flashing in their eyes. Together, they moved in unison, darting around the battlefield, firing blasts at the heir while trying to maintain their formation. They needed to distract him, to pull his attention away from the Guardian King. Cyrus spotted an opening. The heir had shifted his focus, momentarily distracted by the relentless onslaught from the ancients. This was their chance. He turned to his comrades. "Now, push him back." The soldiers rallied, pouring every ounce of energy they had into their weapons. A torrent of energy beams cascaded toward the heir, striking him from multiple angles. He howled in rage, twisting and lashing out as he struggled to fend off the combined assault. But even as the heir was pushed back, a sinister smirk spread across his face. "You think this will work?" he taunted, voice dripping with contempt. I will show you the true meaning of despair." With a wave of his hand, he conjured a dark mist that enveloped the battlefield. The mist seeped into the soldiers' minds, planting seeds of doubt and fear. Cyrus felt it hit him like a tidal wave, a suffocating weight that pressed down on his chest. Whispers filled his ears, echoes of his own fears and insecurities. "You are not enough. You will fail. You are powerless against him." But he pushed against the darkness, focusing on the light of the guardian king and the ancients above. They were his anchor, a reminder of the strength that still resided within him. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to break free of the suffocating grip of the heir's darkness. As if sensing his resolve, the heir's attention snapped to Cyrus. "You think you can resist? You will drown in your own despair." The heir sent a wave of dark energy straight towards Cyrus, but the guardian king intervened, stepping between them. A barrier of light flared to life, absorbing the brunt of the attack. The explosion sent shockwaves through the air, but the guardian king stood firm, his eyes burning with intensity. "Do not falter," he commanded, voice echoing across the battlefield. "Remember who you are." Cyrus nodded, drawing strength from the guardian king's words. He rallied his fellow soldiers, urging them to fight against the darkness that sought to consume them. "We are not alone. We fight for each other, for this world." As their spirits lifted, the soldiers began to push back against the heir's dark influence. They formed a protective circle around the guardian king, channeling their energy into a concentrated beam of light aimed directly at the heir. The power surged between them, an unyielding force of hope and determination. The heir's eyes widened as the beam of light hurtled toward him. "No," he roared, desperation creeping into his voice. He attempted to conjure a shield of darkness, but it faltered against the unrelenting energy of the guardian king and the soldiers. The light collided with the air, erupting into a blinding explosion that illuminated the night. A wave of warmth washed over Cyrus, banishing the remnants of doubt and fear. He could feel the power coursing through him, a connection forged through unity and purpose. As the light faded, the heir stumbled back, his form flickering like a candle threatened by a breeze. Rage and disbelief twisted his features as he struggled to maintain his form. "You think you've won?" he hissed, voice low and venomous. "This is only the beginning." The guardian king stepped forward, resolve hardening in his eyes. "You are mistaken. This ends here." With a fierce shout, he summoned a massive surge of energy, a radiant beam that shot forth toward the air. It pierced through the darkness like a beacon of hope, illuminating the battlefield in a dazzling display of light. The air howled in defiance, but the force of the attack was unstoppable. The energy engulfed him, swirling around his form, and for a moment it seemed as if the very fabric of reality trembled. The soldiers stood in awe as the darkness began to unravel, tendrils of shadow dissipating like smoke in the wind. But just as victory seemed within reach, the heir unleashed one final, desperate act of defiance. He drew upon the very depths of his dark power, conjuring a vortex of energy that threatened to consume everything in its path. The ground shook violently, and the soldiers staggered back as the vortex expanded, swallowing everything in darkness. Cyrus gritted his teeth, panic surging within him. "We can't let him take us all," he shouted to the others. "We have to fight back." With the guardian king at their helm, the soldiers rallied once more. They formed a barrier of light around the guardian king, channeling their energy into a cohesive force that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. The heir laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the chaos. "You think you can defeat me? I am the embodiment of despair." But the guardian king remained resolute. "No more," he shouted, voice booming across the battlefield. "We will not be consumed by your darkness." With a surge of power, the guardian king and the soldiers unleashed a final wave of energy, a brilliant explosion of light that pierced through the air's vortex. The clash sent shockwaves rippling through the air, illuminating the night sky with brilliant colors. The air's form flickered, and for a moment, it seemed as though the darkness would be vanquished. But with a final, desperate howl, the air unleashed a blast of pure malice, a wave of darkness that surged forward to engulf everything in its path. Cyrus felt the heat of the explosion, the energy colliding with his own. Time slowed as he braced himself for impact, fear coursing through him. But in that moment, he felt a surge of strength from the Guardian King, a powerful connection that reignited the flame of hope within him. Now, the Guardian King roared, and Cyrus pushed back with everything he had. The soldiers joined him, their combined energy forming a protective barrier against the heir's assault. As the two forces collided, the darkness began to crumble, the heir's form flickering as if caught in a storm. The soldiers pressed forward, determined to break through the veil of darkness. In a final, desperate push, the Guardian King unleashed a pulse of radiant energy, and the darkness shattered like glass, dispersing into nothingness. The heir screamed, a sound filled with rage and despair as he was consumed by the light. The battlefield erupted in a blinding flash, a wave of energy sweeping through the air, banishing the darkness and filling the void with warmth and hope. As the dust settled, the soldiers found themselves standing amidst the wreckage of their battle, the remnants of the heir's darkness dissipating into the ether. Cyrus fell to his knees, gasping for breath as the weight of the battle lifted. He looked around, seeing the soldiers staring in awe at the Guardian King, who stood tall amidst the ruins. There was no sign of the heir, no trace of his darkness, only the warm glow of the Guardian King's light remained. "We did it," Cyrus whispered, disbelief flooding his voice. "We actually did it." The Guardian King turned to the soldiers, his expression one of pride and determination. "This is but one battle in a much larger war. The darkness will always seek to consume, but as long as you stand united, you will always prevail." A chorus of cheers erupted from the soldiers, voices filled with relief and joy. They embraced one another, tears of gratitude mingling with laughter. Cyrus felt a swell of hope in his chest as he joined them, celebrating their hard-won victory against the heir and the darkness he represented. But amidst the celebration, a shadow loomed on the horizon, a reminder that their fight was far from over. The Guardian King turned his gaze to the distance, a look of concern etched across his features. "This is only the beginning," he murmured, voice heavy with foreboding. "We must prepare for what lies ahead." Cyrus felt a chill run down his spine, but he steeled himself, determination surging within him. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Together, they would stand against whatever threats lay ahead. With renewed purpose, Cyrus looked at his comrades, their spirits ignited by the victory they had achieved. As they prepared to face the challenges that awaited them, he knew one thing for certain. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for each other, for their home, and for a future free from the shadows that threatened to consume them all. And as the first light of dawn broke through the remnants of the night, they stood united, ready to face whatever darkness awaited, determined to forge their path toward a brighter future. Chapter 7. The Gathering Storm. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a crimson hue across the battlefield, where the remnants of the previous clash still lay scattered. Scorched earth and the remnants of energy fields painted a stark picture of the struggle that had transpired. Cyrus stood at the edge of the remnants, gazing at the horizon with a heavy heart, knowing that though they had vanquished the heir, the battle was far from over. The Guardian King stood beside him, his presence a beacon of hope amidst the destruction. The light radiating from him felt like a comforting embrace, but Cyrus could sense the unease that lingered beneath the surface. There was a tension in the air, a foreboding whisper that hinted at darker forces looming just beyond their sight. "Cyrus," the Guardian King began, his voice steady yet laced with gravity. "Our victory over the heir has shifted the tide, but we cannot afford to let our guard down. This darkness is part of a greater scheme, one that seeks to engulf our world." Cyrus nodded, his heart heavy with understanding. "What do you mean? Is there something else out there?" The Guardian King's gaze hardened, his violet eyes narrowing as he looked out toward the horizon. The heir was merely a pawn in a much larger game. There are forces that conspire against us, ancient beings who thrive on chaos and despair. They will not rest until they reclaim their dominion. As the Guardian King spoke, a chill crept into the air, a whisper of something dark approaching. Cyrus felt the weight of the Guardian King's words settle over him, like a cloak of impending doom. He turned to the other soldiers, who were still gathering the remnants of their shattered battleground, their spirits buoyed by victory, but unaware of the storm that was brewing. "Gather the troops," the Guardian King instructed, his voice commanding. "We must convene and prepare for what comes next. The time for complacency has passed." Cyrus moved quickly, rallying the soldiers and urging them to gather in a central location. The air crackled with a sense of urgency as they assembled, weary yet determined. As they formed a circle around the Guardian King, a palpable tension filled the air, thick with anticipation. Once everyone was gathered, the Guardian King raised his hands, the light enveloping him growing brighter, filling the space with warmth. "You have all fought valiantly, and together we have triumphed against the air. But we must understand that this is not the end. The darkness has many faces, and we must be ready to face them." Cyrus felt a surge of determination swell within him, and he stepped forward, meeting the gaze of his fellow soldiers. "We've faced darkness before, and we've come out stronger each time. Together, we can face whatever comes next." The soldiers echoed his sentiments, a chorus of agreement rising around him. They had fought against insurmountable odds and emerged victorious, and the bond forged in battle had made them resilient. "Good," the Guardian King said, his expression softening as he regarded the soldiers. "But resilience alone will not be enough. We must also be wise. The darkness that approaches is cunning and relentless. We need to strategize, to anticipate their moves before they make them." He paused, scanning the faces before him. There are ancient texts that speak of these dark beings, the primordials. They are embodiments of chaos, older than time itself. If they decide to intervene, our chances of survival diminish drastically. A murmur rippled through the crowd, fear creeping into the hearts of the soldiers as they absorbed the weight of the Guardian King's words. The mention of the primordials stirred memories of legends, tales of entities so powerful that entire civilizations had crumbled before their wrath. Cyrus stepped forward, trying to quell the growing anxiety. "What can we do to prepare? If they are as powerful as you say, then we must find a way to counter their influence." The Guardian King nodded, his expression resolute. "We must seek knowledge. There are allies we can call upon, beings who possess wisdom beyond our understanding. We will travel to the enclave of the ancients. They hold the secrets to combating the primordials." "What is the enclave?" one of the soldiers asked, curiosity mingling with apprehension. "It is a sanctuary," the Guardian King explained, hidden from the eyes of darkness. There, the ancients gather to share knowledge and prepare against the encroaching shadows. It is our best chance to learn how to combat the threat that lies ahead. Cyrus felt a surge of hope at the mention of allies. The ancients had always been a source of inspiration, their wisdom guiding the guardianship of their realm. "When do we leave?" he asked, determination coloring his tone. "Immediately," the Guardian King replied. "The longer we wait, the stronger the darkness grows. We cannot afford to delay." The soldiers nodded, readying themselves for the journey ahead. They gathered their supplies and prepared to follow the Guardian King into the unknown. As they set out, the shadows lengthened behind them, a reminder of the dangers that still lurked beyond their sight. The path to the enclave wound through treacherous terrain, a landscape marked by jagged cliffs and dense forests that whispered secrets of old. As they traversed the winding trails, Cyrus felt the weight of their mission settle heavily on his shoulders. Each step took them deeper into the heart of the unknown, and with it came a sense of foreboding. Hours passed, the sun dipping beneath the horizon as the sky transformed into a canvas of twilight colors. The darkness encroached upon them, thickening the air and sending shivers down Cyrus's spine. He glanced at the Guardian King, who remained stoic and resolute, leading the way through the labyrinthine paths. "We must remain vigilant," the Guardian King cautioned, voice low and steady. "The primordials are drawn to fear, and they will exploit any weakness." Cyrus nodded, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. He focused on the rhythm of his heart, drawing strength from the camaraderie of his fellow soldiers. They were united, a force against the darkness, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they moved deeper into the forest, the atmosphere shifted, and an unnatural silence fell over them. The rustling of leaves ceased, and the air grew still, heavy with an oppressive energy that sent a chill down Cyrus's spine. He exchanged worried glances with the other soldiers, unease creeping into their hearts. "Stay alert," the Guardian King commanded, his voice a steady anchor amidst the growing tension. Something is not right. Just then, a low growl echoed through the trees, reverberating in the air like thunder. The soldiers tensed, weapons raised, eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of movement. A dark figure emerged from the depths of the forest, stalking toward them with an eerie grace. It was a creature, a grotesque fusion of shadow and flesh, its eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. The air around it shimmered, distorting the landscape as if reality itself was bending to its will. The soldiers stepped back, fear coursing through them as they faced the abomination. "Stand together," the Guardian King commanded, a fierce light emanating from him as he prepared to confront the creature. "Do not let fear take hold." Cyrus felt the energy swell within him, and he stepped forward, raising his weapon against the dark figure. "We can't let it get to us. We're stronger together." The creature lunged, a blur of movement that threatened to engulf them in darkness. The soldiers fired their weapons, beams of light slicing through the shadows, but the creature twisted and evaded their attacks, its laughter echoing through the night, a chilling sound that sent shivers racing down Cyrus's spine. "Foolish mortals," it taunted, voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can stand against the tide of darkness? You are but insects to be crushed." With a roar, the Guardian King unleashed a pulse of energy, a brilliant wave that surged toward the creature. The force collided with the shadowy figure, momentarily staggering it back, but the creature quickly recovered, launching itself toward the Guardian King with renewed ferocity. Cyrus felt adrenaline surge through his veins as he reloaded, desperate to find a way to assist the Guardian King. "We need to flank it," he shouted to the others. "Let's take it down together." The soldiers nodded, rallying around Cyrus as they prepared to attack from multiple angles. The creature snarled, its attention shifting between them and the Guardian King, who stood firm, radiating light and strength. Cyrus darted to the left, using the cover of trees to hide his movement. As he circled around, he took aim, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the Guardian King holding the creature at bay, but they needed to strike quickly before the creature regained its composure. "Now!" Cyrus shouted, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts aimed at the creature's flank. The attacks struck true, and the creature howled in fury, its focus shifting back toward Cyrus. In that moment, the Guardian King seized the opportunity. "Strike while it's vulnerable," he roared, channeling a surge of energy into a concentrated blast aimed directly at the creature's core. The collision sent shockwaves through the air, and the creature staggered back, its form flickering as if struggling to maintain its shape. But instead of retreating, it let out a deafening roar, summoning forth shadows that coalesced around it like a cloak of darkness. "You cannot defeat me," it screamed, its voice a mixture of rage and despair. "I am a harbinger of chaos. I will consume your light." Cyrus felt a flicker of fear deep within him, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the bond that connected him to his comrades. "Together," he urged, rallying the soldiers to unite their strength. They formed a circle around the Guardian King, channeling their energy into a collective force that surged outward, illuminating the area with a brilliant glow. The darkness writhed against the light, struggling to maintain its hold, but slowly it began to dissipate. With a final cry of desperation, the creature lunged toward them, but the combined energy of the soldiers overwhelmed it. The light pierced through the darkness, unraveling its form until nothing but shadows faded away, leaving only silence in its wake. Cyrus fell to his knees, gasping for breath as the adrenaline coursed through him. The soldiers exchanged glances, relief flooding their expressions. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious once again, but the victory felt hollow. "What was that thing?" one soldier whispered, still trembling from the encounter. The Guardian King stepped forward, his expression grave. "It was a manifestation of the darkness, a creature born from despair. This is a glimpse of what lies ahead. The primordials will send more of their minions to test our resolve." Cyrus nodded, understanding the weight of their journey. They had faced one challenge, but the battle for their world was far from over. "We need to press on," he said, his voice steady. We can't let fear control us. The soldiers rallied around him, the bond between them stronger than ever as they set off once more. The path ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty, but they moved forward with purpose, ready to confront whatever darkness awaited them. As they traversed the forest, the sounds of nature began to return, a symphony of rustling leaves and distant animal calls. The oppressive air lifted slightly, but a lingering sense of unease settled over them. They had faced one enemy, but the shadows were still gathering. Hours later, they arrived at the foot of a towering mountain, its peak shrouded in clouds. At its base lay the entrance to the Enclave of the Ancients, a cavern carved into the mountainside, its mouth framed by ancient stone and glowing runes. "This is it," the Guardian King said, gesturing toward the entrance. "The Enclave is a place of knowledge and refuge. Here we will find the answers we seek." Cyrus felt a swell of anticipation as they approached the entrance. The air was thick with magic, the energy palpable as they crossed the threshold into the cavern. The interior opened up into a vast chamber, illuminated by ethereal light that danced along the walls. Ancient symbols adorned the stone, telling tales of battles fought and victories won. It was a place steeped in history, a sanctuary of wisdom where the ancients gathered to protect their realm. As they ventured deeper into the cavern, Cyrus felt a sense of awe wash over him. The walls pulsed with energy, resonating with the very heartbeat of the world. It was as if the ancients themselves were watching over them, guiding their steps as they sought knowledge. At the heart of the enclave, they found a grand chamber, dominated by a massive stone table adorned with intricate carvings. Seated around it were figures cloaked in shimmering robes, their faces obscured by hoods that glimmered like stars. "Welcome, guardians of light," one of the figures spoke, voice resonating like a distant echo. "We have awaited your arrival." Cyrus stepped forward, determination surging within him. "We seek knowledge about the primordials and how to combat their darkness. We have faced one of their minions, but we know there are greater threats ahead." The figures exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them before one rose, stepping forward. "The primordials are ancient entities, and their power is vast. They feed on despair, growing stronger with every flicker of hope extinguished. To combat them, you must first understand their nature." Cyrus listened intently, heart racing with anticipation. "What must we do?" "You must gather the remnants of light within yourselves," the ancient continued. "Embrace your fears, confront the darkness within, and forge your resolve. Only then will you wield the power necessary to combat the shadows." The words resonated deep within Cyrus, awakening a sense of purpose he had not realized was dormant. He glanced at his comrades, feeling the strength of their unity, and he knew they could face whatever trials lay ahead. "Together, we will face this darkness," he declared, voice steady. "We will not be consumed by fear. We will rise against the primordials and protect our world." The ancients nodded, their expressions solemn yet approving. "Your resolve is commendable, but the journey will not be easy. Prepare yourselves, for the trials you face will test the very fabric of your spirits." As the ancients shared their wisdom, Cyrus felt a shift within himself, a deepening understanding of the bond he shared with his comrades. Together, they would confront the gathering storm, facing whatever challenges awaited them with unwavering resolve. In the heart of the enclave, beneath the watchful eyes of the ancients, they began to forge their path against the darkness, united in purpose and ready to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 8. Shadows of the Abyss. The air in the enclave felt thick with anticipation, a charged atmosphere that crackled like static electricity. As the ancients shared their knowledge, the whispers of history resonated in Cyrus's mind, each tale weaving a tapestry of the battles fought and sacrifices made. It was a reminder that they stood on the shoulders of those who had come before, guardians who had faced unimaginable horrors to protect their world. Cyrus sat at the stone table, surrounded by his comrades, the weight of their mission pressing down on him like a heavy cloak. He could feel the energy pulsing around them, the very essence of the enclave vibrating in tune with their determination. The ancients, with their cloaked forms and hidden faces, watched them intently, their presence both comforting and intimidating. "Tell us about the primordials," Cyrus urged, leaning forward, the flickering light casting shadows across his determined face. What weaknesses do they have? How can we fight against such powerful beings? One of the ancients, a figure with a voice that resonated like distant thunder, leaned forward, revealing a glimpse of a luminous face. The primordials are embodiments of chaos, born from the void that existed before creation. They thrive on fear, despair, and suffering. To defeat them, you must understand that their power lies in the darkness of the heart and the shadows of the mind. Cyrus exchanged glances with his comrades, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on them. "What do you mean?" he pressed, curiosity driving him forward. "How can we fight something that feeds on our darkest fears?" The ancient raised a hand, the light around them shimmering in response. Each primordial is unique, bound to a specific aspect of chaos. Their strengths lie in their dominion over fear, pain, and suffering. But they are not invincible. They have weaknesses, threads of light that can be pulled to unravel their power. "Then tell us how to find these weaknesses," another soldier urged, his voice steady, revealing the resolve that had been forged in the fires of battle. "The first step is to confront your own fears," the ancient replied. "You must face the darkness within yourselves, the very shadows that threaten to consume you. Only by confronting your own demons can you hope to stand against the primordials. This is the only way to unearth the light hidden within you." Cyrus felt a chill creep up his spine at the thought of confronting his own fears. He had faced many challenges, but the idea of delving into his own darkness felt like a terrifying abyss. Yet he understood the truth in the ancient's words. They had come too far to turn back now. "I am willing to face my fears," Cyrus declared, his voice steady. "We all are. We can't let the darkness win." The ancients exchanged knowing glances, their expressions unreadable beneath their hoods. "Very well," the first ancient said. "You must undergo the trials of the heart. Each of you will be tested, forced to confront the fears that reside within. Only by emerging from these trials can you harness the light that lies dormant in your spirits." A murmur of uncertainty rippled through the group. The trials of the heart were spoken of in hushed tones, an ancient rite that had been used to prepare guardians for the battles ahead. It was not a task to be taken lightly. "What do the trials entail?" Cyrus asked, his heart racing at the prospect of facing the unknown. "They will manifest your deepest fears, drawing them forth from the recesses of your mind," the ancient explained. "You will face visions of despair, pain, and loss. It is a path that will test your will and resolve. You must confront these fears head-on, for only then can you emerge stronger." Cyrus steeled himself, determination flooding his veins. "I will do it. We will face the trials together." The Guardian King stepped forward, his presence radiating confidence. "We stand united in this. If one of us falters, we all falter. Together, we will face the darkness and emerge victorious." As the ancients prepared the chamber for the trials, Cyrus felt a mix of fear and anticipation swirling within him. He glanced at his comrades, each of them steeling themselves for the challenges ahead. They had fought side by side, faced death and despair together, and now they would delve into the very heart of their own fears. The chamber shifted, the air thickening as the ancients chanted in a language that felt both ancient and powerful. Energy crackled around them, the walls pulsating with light as a portal opened before them. A swirling vortex of colors that beckoned them closer. "Step through the portal when you are ready," the first ancient instructed. "Once you enter, the trials will begin. You will be transported to the realm of your fears. Remember, you are not alone. Your comrades will be there with you, even if you cannot see them." Cyrus took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He turned to his comrades, their faces a mixture of determination and trepidation. "We will face this together. No matter what we see, we'll emerge stronger." One by one, they stepped toward the portal, a mixture of resolve and anxiety swirling in the air. As Cyrus stepped through the threshold, he felt the world shift around him, the very fabric of reality bending as he was pulled into the realm of his fears. The sensation was disorienting, a whirlwind of colors and sensations that left him breathless. He tumbled through the vortex until he landed on solid ground, gasping as he looked around. He found himself in a dimly lit forest, the trees twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The atmosphere was thick with fog, and the air carried an unsettling silence, as if the world was holding its breath. A chill crept through him, and he felt the weight of despair pressing down like an iron shroud. "Stay focused," he whispered to himself, trying to quell the rising tide of fear. He had to remember why he was here, to confront the darkness within, to emerge stronger for his comrades and the world they fought to protect. As he began to walk through the forest, the shadows seemed to shift and swirl, whispering dark secrets in his ears. Each rustle of leaves sent shivers down his spine, and he felt an overwhelming sense of dread creeping in. But he pressed on, steeling himself against the growing unease. "Face your fears," he repeated like a mantra, hoping to drown out the whispers that taunted him. "You are not alone." Suddenly a figure appeared before him, cloaked in darkness, its features obscured. Cyrus's heart raced as the figure stepped into the dim light, revealing the visage of someone he had lost long ago, his younger sister, Alara. "Alara," he gasped, shock flooding through him. She looked just as she had the day she had vanished, her eyes wide and filled with sorrow. How was this possible? She stepped closer, her expression hauntingly familiar yet twisted with despair. "You left me, Cyrus. You promised you would protect me, but you weren't there when I needed you the most." Pain pierced through him, a sharp reminder of the guilt he had carried for years. "I tried to find you. I searched everywhere." "But it was too late," she said, her voice echoing with grief. "You failed me, and now you're trapped in this darkness." The forest around them seemed to close in, shadows swirling like a tempest as Cyrus struggled against the wave of despair threatening to engulf him. "No, I will not succumb to this," he shouted, shaking his head to dispel the illusion. "You're not real. This is a trick." Alara's expression shifted, twisting into a malevolent sneer. "Am I not real? You carry the weight of my death on your shoulders. You've been haunted by your failure ever since. Can you truly face it?" With a roar of defiance, Cyrus charged at the apparition, determination fueling his every move. "I will not let you consume me. I will not be defined by my past." As he lunged forward, the illusion flickered, and the forest dissolved around him, replaced by a vast expanse of darkness. He found himself standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into an abyss that seemed to stretch into infinity. "Embrace your fear," a voice echoed from the depths of the void, taunting him. "You cannot escape the truth." Cyrus fought against the overwhelming despair, threatening to pull him under. He felt the weight of his sister's loss pressing down on him, but he refused to yield. "I will not be consumed," he shouted, his voice ringing out against the silence. In that moment, a flicker of light ignited within him, a spark of hope that began to illuminate the darkness. He reached deep within, calling upon the memories of his sister, not as a reminder of failure, but as a source of strength. "I loved her," he declared, the light within him growing brighter. "I fought for her. I will not let her memory be twisted into this darkness." As the light surged forth, the shadows recoiled, the abyss rippling as if in pain. Cyrus felt the presence of his comrades around him, their spirits bolstering his resolve. They had faced darkness together, and this would be no different. With a final surge of energy, he leaped into the abyss, embracing the light within as he descended. The darkness shattered around him, and in that moment, he understood the truth. He had faced his fear, not as a burden, but as a testament to his strength. He landed on solid ground, panting but resolute. The darkness had been vanquished, and in its place he felt a profound sense of clarity. He had faced his past, accepted it, and emerged stronger. As the light enveloped him, he heard the distant echoes of his comrades, their voices calling out to him. They had faced their own trials, and he knew they would reunite once more, stronger and more united than ever. The chamber began to shift around him, the darkness giving way to bright light as he was pulled back into the enclave. He emerged from the portal, breathless but alive, his spirit renewed. His comrades were waiting for him, their faces filled with anticipation. "You did it," one shouted, rushing to embrace him. Cyrus smiled, feeling the warmth of their camaraderie surrounding him. "We all will. We will face the darkness together." As they gathered, the ancients watched with approving expressions, their eyes glimmering with wisdom. "You have faced the first trial and emerged victorious," one of them said, voice resonating with pride. But more trials await you. Each guardian must confront their own fears, and only then can you unite your strength to face the primordials. Cyrus nodded, the fire of determination igniting within him once more. They were not finished yet. This was only the beginning of their journey. As his comrades prepared for their trials, he felt an unbreakable bond form between them, a connection forged in the crucible of fear and courage. Together, we will overcome whatever challenges lie ahead, Cyrus vowed, his voice steady and filled with conviction. We will rise against the darkness and protect our world. As they began to prepare for the next trials, a sense of purpose enveloped them, the weight of their mission pressing down like a heavy cloak. The echoes of the past had fueled their resolve, reminding them that they were not alone. They would face the darkness together, united in purpose and ready to confront whatever lay ahead. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. As dawn broke over the enclave, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the ancient trees, casting golden hues across the sacred ground. The air was thick with anticipation, the energy palpable as the guardians prepared for the next phase of their journey. Cyrus stood at the edge of the clearing, his heart racing as he considered what lay ahead. They had faced their fears, emerged from the trials of the heart, but the shadows of the primordials loomed ever closer, threatening to engulf their world. The ancients, cloaked figures of wisdom and power, gathered around the stone table in the center of the clearing, their faces shrouded in mystery. The flickering torches illuminated their forms, and a hush fell over the guardians as they awaited the guidance of their elders. Cyrus could sense the weight of their knowledge, the centuries of experience that filled the air, and it made his heart pound with both excitement and trepidation. Guardians, one of the ancients began, his voice deep and resonant, echoing through the silence. You have proven your strength by confronting your fears. Now, you must learn of the primordials and prepare for the battle that lies ahead. Cyrus straightened, his focus sharpening. He felt a sense of unity with his comrades, their shared determination flowing through him like a powerful current. They had faced their demons, and now they stood ready to confront the dark forces threatening their existence. The primordials are beings of immense power, the ancient continued, pacing slowly as he spoke. They are not merely monsters. They are embodiments of chaos, each one tied to an aspect of the darkness that festers in the hearts of all creatures. They thrive on fear, despair, and suffering. A murmur of concern rippled through the gathered guardians. Cyrus exchanged glances with his comrades, their faces a mixture of determination and apprehension. They had already faced so much, yet the thought of confronting the primordials sent a chill through him. You will need to understand their strengths and weaknesses, the ancient continued. The primordials are powerful, but they are not invulnerable. They can be weakened by the very emotions they feed upon. When you confront them, remember this: their strength is tied to the despair they instill. By sowing hope, you can diminish their power. Cyrus nodded, the words resonating within him. How do we sow hope against such overwhelming darkness? He asked, his voice steady despite the weight of the question. The ancient paused, his eyes glimmering with ancient wisdom. By inspiring others, by uniting the spirits of those who fight alongside you. You must gather the guardians, allies from every corner of this world, and forge a united front against the chaos that threatens to engulf us all. With a determined fire igniting within him, Cyrus glanced around at his comrades, their resolve mirrored in their expressions. They were ready to answer the call, to rise against the darkness together. Then we gather our allies, Cyrus declared, his voice ringing with conviction. We will unite the guardians and face the primordials as one. The ancients nodded, approving of his spirit. You will need to visit the various factions, those who dwell in the shadows and those who dwell in the light. Seek the elemental guardians, the mystics, and the sentinels. Each group possesses unique strengths that will aid in the fight against the primordials. Cyrus felt a surge of purpose. We will travel to each faction and rally them to our cause, he stated firmly. Together, we will stand against the encroaching darkness. As the ancients shared more information about the factions, Cyrus took a mental note of their locations and characteristics. The elemental guardians wielded the power of nature, each attuned to a specific element: earth, air, fire, and water. The mystics were wise beings with deep knowledge of the arcane arts, capable of wielding spells that could bend reality itself. The sentinels were warriors of unmatched skill, skilled in combat and strategy, standing as the protectors of the realm. "Time is of the essence," the ancient warned, his voice low and grave. "The primordials grow restless and the darkness spreads. You must act swiftly." Cyrus felt the weight of urgency settle over him. "We'll split into groups," he suggested, turning to his comrades. "We can cover more ground that way. We'll gather intelligence and rally support." The Guardians nodded, their determination evident as they began to strategize. Cyrus felt a swell of pride as he watched them work together, their camaraderie palpable. They were not just allies, they were family, bound by a common purpose. As they formed their teams, Cyrus found himself partnering with Alara, a fierce warrior who had proven her mettle during the trials. "I'll head to the Elemental Guardians," he said, determination burning in his chest. "I believe they will respond to the call to defend our world." Alara nodded, her eyes shining with resolve. "I'll accompany you. My affinity for the Earth Elementals will help us gain their trust." "Good," Cyrus replied, his spirits lifting. "And I'll gather the mystics. Their knowledge will be invaluable." As the plans solidified, the groups formed and prepared for their journeys. They packed their supplies, ensuring they were ready for whatever challenges awaited them. The air buzzed with excitement and anticipation, each guardian eager to fulfill their role in the fight against the encroaching darkness. The sun hung low in the sky as Cyrus and Alara set off toward the mountains where the elemental guardians resided. The journey was long and treacherous, but they pressed on, fueled by their shared determination. The mountains loomed ahead, majestic and imposing, their peaks shrouded in mist. As they climbed higher, the landscape transformed around them. The trees grew thicker, the air colder, and the very ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with life. Alara moved with grace, her connection to the earth guiding her steps, while Cyrus focused on the path ahead, his heart racing with anticipation. "Do you think the Elemental Guardians will respond to our plea?" Alara asked, glancing at him with concern. Cyrus nodded, his resolve unwavering. "They understand the stakes. They've felt the darkness encroaching just as we have. They know that if we don't stand together, we could all be lost." As they reached the summit, a breathtaking view unfolded before them. The valley below stretched out like a living tapestry, vibrant greens and blues woven together in harmony. Cyrus felt a sense of awe wash over him, the beauty of the world reminding him of what they were fighting for. "Let's call for the Elemental Guardians," Alara suggested, her voice filled with determination. "They must know of our arrival." Cyrus nodded, moving to a clearing that overlooked the valley. He drew in a deep breath, centering himself as he prepared to reach out to the guardians of the elements. With Alara by his side, he began to chant the ancient words, invoking the spirits of the earth. The ground trembled beneath them, the wind picked up, and the air crackled with energy as they called out for the elemental guardians. Moments passed, each heartbeat echoing with anticipation, until finally, a response echoed back through the valley. From the depths of the earth, a massive figure emerged, formed from the very stones and soil. The elemental guardian of earth, tall and imposing, stepped forward, his features chiseled and rough like granite. He regarded them with eyes that glimmered like emeralds, radiating ancient wisdom. "Who dares summon the guardians of earth?" His voice rumbled like thunder, resonating through the air. Cyrus stepped forward, feeling the weight of the guardian's gaze. "We are the guardians of light, seeking allies in the battle against the primordials. Darkness threatens to engulf our world, and we need your strength to stand against it." The Earth Guardian studied them for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. "The primordials are ancient and powerful. Why should we risk our lives for your cause?" "Because if we fail, there will be no world left for any of us," Alara interjected, her voice steady and resolute. "The darkness will consume everything, including your home. We stand united against this threat, and together we can drive it back." The Earth Guardian seemed to ponder her words, the wind swirling around him as he considered their plea. Finally, he nodded, his decision made. "I will gather the elemental guardians, but know this, The battle will require all your strength and courage. If you falter, the consequences will be dire. Cyrus felt a rush of gratitude. Thank you. We won't let you down. Together, we will face the darkness. With a wave of the guardian's hand, the earth trembled again, and the ground split open, revealing a hidden passage that led deep into the heart of the mountains. Follow me, the guardian commanded, his voice firm. The others will join us in the Council of Elements. Cyrus and Alara exchanged determined glances before stepping into the passage. The walls glimmered with luminescent stones, illuminating their path as they descended deeper into the earth. The air grew cooler, charged with an energy that made the hairs on their arms stand on end. As they reached the council chamber, Cyrus's breath caught in his throat. The chamber was vast and awe-inspiring, the walls adorned with intricate carvings depicting the elemental forces at play. At the center stood a stone altar, surrounded by 4 elemental pillars, each representing earth, air, fire, and water. The elemental guardians gathered around the altar, their forms shifting and swirling like the very elements they embodied. Cyrus felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as he stood among them, knowing the weight of their expectations rested upon him and Alara. "Why have you come to summon us?" The guardian of air spoke, her voice light and breezy, yet filled with authority. She hovered above the ground, her translucent form shimmering with the colors of the sky. "We seek your alliance against the primordials," Cyrus explained, finding his voice amidst the powerful beings surrounding him. "We must stand united to protect our world from destruction." The guardians listened intently, their expressions shifting as he spoke. When he finished, silence hung in the air, heavy with the gravity of their situation. Finally, the guardian of fire stepped forward, his form crackling with flames. "The primordials are formidable. We have faced them before, and they do not easily yield. What makes you believe this time will be different?" "Because we are united," Alara replied, her voice unwavering. "If we combine our strengths and stand as one, we can drive them back. Together, we can ignite hope in the hearts of those who fight against despair." The guardians exchanged glances, murmurs of contemplation swirling among them. Cyrus could sense their hesitation, the fear of risking their lives in a battle against such dark forces. Hope is a fragile thing. The guardian of water finally spoke, her voice flowing like a gentle stream. "But it is also a powerful force. If you can gather the strength of the people and inspire them to join your cause, then perhaps we will lend our strength." Cyrus felt a surge of determination. "We will inspire them. We'll remind everyone of what we are fighting for, the future of our world, the lives of our loved ones. Together, we can make a difference." The guardians seemed to ponder his words, the flickering torches casting shadows across their faces. Finally, the Earth Guardian nodded, the rumble of his voice echoing through the chamber. "Very well. We will stand with you, Guardians of Light. We shall unite our strength to face the primordials." Cheers erupted from the assembled guardians, a chorus of hope filling the chamber as Cyrus felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had taken the first step toward rallying their allies, and now they had the elemental guardians by their side. "We must prepare," the guardian of air declared, her form solidifying as she descended to the ground. "We'll need to gather our resources and strategize for the battle ahead." "Indeed," Cyrus agreed, his mind racing with possibilities. "We can start training our forces and developing a plan to confront the primordials." As the guardians began to organize and discuss their strategies, Cyrus felt a renewed sense of purpose. The darkness ahead was still daunting, but with the elemental guardians at their side, they had a fighting chance. Hours passed as the guardians worked together, exchanging ideas and insights. The council chamber buzzed with energy as they mapped out their plan, each guardian contributing their unique skills and abilities. When the meeting finally concluded, Cyrus felt a sense of accomplishment. They had forged a powerful alliance, and with their combined strengths, they would stand against the primordials. "Now we must visit the mystics," Alara reminded him, her eyes sparkling with determination. "They will provide us with the knowledge and magic we need for the battle." Cyrus nodded, his heart racing with anticipation. "Let's go. The sooner we gather our allies, the stronger we will become." With the elemental guardians leading the way, they set off toward the mystical realm of the mystics. the air crackling with excitement and the promise of what lay ahead. Each step brought them closer to their goal, and Cyrus felt the weight of the world resting on their shoulders. As they journeyed, Cyrus couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was closing in around them. The winds shifted ominously, and shadows flickered at the edges of his vision. He shared a worried glance with Alara, who seemed to sense it too. "We need to hurry," he urged, his voice low. "The primordials won't wait for us to gather our forces." "We'll get there," Alara replied, determination shining in her eyes. "We have to believe that we can make a difference." With renewed purpose, they pressed on, the fate of their world hanging in the balance. The storm was gathering, and they had to be ready to face it head-on. As they continued their journey, Cyrus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, but he pushed the thought aside. They were guardians, and together, they would rise to meet whatever darkness awaited them. Chapter 10. The Battle of Shadows. The air crackled with tension as the guardians stood at the edge of the sacred grounds, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the impending storm. The elemental guardians had lent their strength, and now, alongside the mystics they had gathered, they prepared to face the greatest threat their world had ever known, the primordials. As the dark clouds rolled in, the wind howled like a mournful spirit, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. Cyrus looked around at his comrades, their faces illuminated by the flickering torches that cast long shadows on the ground. The elemental guardians stood tall and resolute, their elemental energies swirling around them, while the mystics gathered, their robes billowing like wisps of smoke. The guardians of light were a tapestry of strength, unity, and determination, ready to confront the darkness threatening their existence. "We stand united," Cyrus called out, his voice cutting through the oppressive atmosphere. "Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone who cannot fight for themselves. The primordials have brought chaos and despair to our world, but together we shall drive them back." A roar of agreement surged through the ranks of guardians, igniting a fire in their hearts. They were ready to stand against the dark forces that threatened to engulf their world, their spirits buoyed by the unity forged in their shared purpose. As the sky darkened and the first rumblings of thunder echoed in the distance, the ancients emerged from the shadows, their faces grave and lined with the wisdom of ages. "You must be cautious," one of them warned, his voice deep and resonant. "The primordials are cunning and powerful. They will exploit any weakness they sense." Cyrus nodded, his resolve unwavering. "We are prepared. We know their strengths and their weaknesses. We will fight together, and we will not falter." With a final nod of approval, the ancients stepped back, allowing the guardians to take their positions. Cyrus felt a surge of adrenaline as he surveyed the battlefield ahead. The ground was uneven, marked by ancient runes that glowed faintly beneath their feet. It was a sacred site, the place where light and dark had clashed throughout history. As the wind picked up, the atmosphere shifted, and a dark presence descended upon the battlefield. Shadows coalesced into forms, swirling and shifting, until the first primordial emerged from the darkness. Its visage was monstrous, a grotesque amalgamation of fear and despair, with eyes that burned like molten lava. The air around it grew cold, and Cyrus felt the weight of its malevolence. "Fools!" the primordial bellowed, its voice a chilling echo that reverberated through the air. "You think you can stand against the darkness? You will fall, like all who have dared to challenge us." Cyrus stepped forward, his heart racing as he met the creature's gaze. "We will not yield to you. We fight for the light, and we will not let you extinguish it." With a roar, the primordial charged forward, a tide of darkness crashing against the guardians. Cyrus barely had time to react before the creature was upon them, its claws outstretched, seeking to rend and destroy. "Guardians, form a line," Cyrus shouted, instinctively drawing his sword. The elemental guardians stepped forward, their powers flaring to life as they prepared to meet the oncoming onslaught. Alara, her face set in determination, called upon the earth's energy, summoning massive stone walls that rose up from the ground, creating a barrier against the primordial's assault. The earth trembled beneath her command, and the first wave of darkness crashed against the stone, sending shards flying into the air. "Now, Push back, Alara cried, and the elemental guardians responded, unleashing their elemental powers. The guardian of fire sent forth waves of flames, engulfing the shadows in searing light, while the guardian of water conjured torrents that washed over the darkness, weakening its grip. Cyrus moved with purpose, striking down any shadow that dared to approach. He felt the power of the guardians around him, the collective energy infusing him with strength and courage. But the darkness was relentless, and for every shadow they dispelled, more emerged from the depths, hungry for chaos and despair. Focus on the core, a mystic shouted from the backline, her hands weaving intricate symbols in the air. We need to weaken the primordial's essence. Cyrus nodded, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the pulsating core of darkness at the creature's center. Alara, can you create a path for me? With a fierce nod, Alara summoned her powers again, raising the earth to form a protective barrier around Cyrus as he charged forward. He dodged the slashing claws of the primordial, feeling the rush of wind as they sliced through the air, narrowly missing him. Now! He shouted, and the elemental guardians responded, sending a surge of elemental energy toward him, empowering his strike. He could feel the heat of the flames, the force of the water, and the grounding strength of the earth as he approached the heart of darkness. With a mighty swing of his sword, Cyrus struck the core, the impact resonating through him as light exploded in a blinding flash. The primordial roared in agony, its form writhing as the light pierced through the darkness, illuminating the battlefield. Shadows dissipated around them, and the guardians pressed forward, their resolve bolstered by the success of their strike. But as the creature faltered, more shadows emerged from the darkness, drawn by the chaos of the battle. Each primordial that appeared was more powerful than the last, and the guardians found themselves outnumbered. The air grew thick with despair, and Cyrus felt the weight of the shadows pressing down on him. "We need to regroup," he shouted, glancing back at his comrades. They were fierce and resilient, but the onslaught was relentless, each moment stretching their endurance. The guardians formed a defensive circle, their backs pressed together as they fought off the encroaching darkness. As the battle raged on, the ground shook violently, and a second primordial emerged from the depths. This one larger and more grotesque than the first. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its roar sent a wave of dread through the guardians. "The Keeper of Despair," one of the mystics breathed, her voice trembling. "This is one of the most powerful primordials." Cyrus clenched his fists, his heart racing as the Keeper advanced, its very presence sapping the strength from the air. "We can't let it close in," he shouted. "Focus your energies on it. We must contain it." With renewed determination, the guardians unleashed their powers, channeling their strength toward the Keeper. The elemental guardians combined their elements, creating a barrier of light and energy that pulsed with intensity. Fire danced along the edges, water swirled in patterns, and earth fortified their defenses. The Keeper lunged forward, its claws outstretched, but the guardians held strong, pushing back against the tide of darkness. Cyrus felt the heat of the flames, the weight of the earth, and the coolness of the water channeling through him, each element amplifying his resolve. "Now!" Cyrus shouted, and with one united push, they forced the Keeper back, their combined strength overwhelming the darkness. The Keeper howled in rage, its form distorting as the light fought against the shadows that enveloped it. But the darkness was cunning, and as the Keeper faltered, more shadows emerged to replace it. The battlefield was a tempest of chaos, swirling shadows clashing against the light, the air thick with the cries of battle. "Cyrus!" Alara shouted, her voice cutting through the din. "We need to find the source of the primordials. Strength. They're drawing power from the shadows." Cyrus nodded, his heart pounding as he scanned the battlefield. "We need to separate the shadows from the primordials. If we can sever their connection to the darkness, we can weaken them." With a rallying cry, the guardians formed a new strategy, focusing their energies on disrupting the shadows. They began to weave their powers together, creating a whirlwind of light that pulsed with energy. The ground shook as they conjured a barrier of pure light, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. The primordials roared in frustration, their forms distorting as the guardians fought back. With every pulse of light, the shadows writhed, struggling to maintain their hold on the battlefield. Cyrus felt the connection between the darkness and the primordials beginning to fray, their strength waning with each moment. "Now, strike at their hearts," he commanded, and the guardians surged forward, unleashing their powers in a final, coordinated assault. Alara summoned the very essence of the earth, raising massive pillars of stone that crashed down upon the primordials, while the guardian of fire sent forth waves of flames that engulfed the shadows. Cyrus charged forward, his sword gleaming with light as he aimed for the core of the Keeper of Despair. The darkness writhed around him, but he pressed on, his heart pounding with determination. He could see the glimmer of light within the Keeper, the flickering essence of hope that still fought against the darkness. With a fierce battle cry, he swung his sword, channeling all his energy into a single strike. The blade connected with the core, and an explosion of light erupted, engulfing the battlefield in a radiant blaze. The Keeper howled in agony as the light pierced through the darkness, pushing back the shadows that clung to it. Cyrus felt the rush of victory surge through him as the shadows began to dissipate, the grip of the primordials weakening. But as the first rays of dawn began to break through the darkness, he sensed an even greater threat looming in the shadows. From the depths of the darkness, a figure emerged, its presence suffocating and powerful. This primordial was unlike any they had faced, a towering beast with eyes that burned like molten metal. It emanated a darkness that seemed to swallow the light whole, and Cyrus felt a chill race down his spine. "Fools!" the new primordial bellowed, its voice echoing with malice. "You think you can defeat me? I am the King of Shadows. I will not be so easily vanquished." The ground trembled as the king stepped forward, shadows twisting and writhing around it like a living cloak. Cyrus felt the air grow heavy with despair, the very essence of hope wavering as the King of Shadows advanced. "We can't let it close in," he shouted to his comrades, feeling the weight of their desperation as the king approached. The guardians rallied around him, their faces set with determination, but Cyrus could see the flicker of fear in their eyes. "Focus your energies," Alara shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. "We can't let it separate us." With a united front, the guardians formed a defensive line, channeling their powers toward the encroaching darkness. The king roared, its voice shaking the ground as it unleashed a wave of shadow, threatening to engulf them all. Cyrus could feel the darkness pressing in around him, but he refused to back down. He raised his sword high, channeling the light within him, and with a fierce battle cry, he charged forward. "Stand strong," he shouted, and the guardians pushed back against the darkness, their elemental powers surging as they fought against the overwhelming tide. The King of Shadows met them head-on, its claws slashing through the air, but the guardians held their ground. With each strike, they pushed back against the darkness, their united strength a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. As the battle raged on, Cyrus felt the tide of darkness beginning to shift. The shadows were faltering, their connection to the king weakening with every pulse of light they unleashed. But he could sense that it was only a matter of time before the king retaliated with even greater force. With a fierce determination, Cyrus charged toward the king, his sword glowing with the essence of the guardians. "We can end this," he shouted, his heart racing as he closed the distance. "We can banish the darkness." As he swung his sword, the king howled in fury, its claws striking out to meet him. But the combined strength of the guardians surged behind him, a tidal wave of light and power that pushed back the shadows. The clash of darkness and light resonated through the battlefield, a cacophony of sound that reverberated in their bones. With every swing of his sword, Cyrus felt the connection between the king and the shadows weaken, the grip of despair loosening. But as he pressed forward, a chilling realization dawned on him. The darkness was more than just a force, it was a manifestation of the fears and sorrows of the world. To defeat the king, they needed to confront that darkness within themselves. "Remember who we are," Cyrus shouted, his voice ringing with conviction. "We are guardians of light. We carry the hopes and dreams of our people. We cannot let despair consume us." With those words, the guardians rallied around him, their spirits igniting with renewed strength. Together, they unleashed a final surge of energy, channeling their light into a single concentrated beam that pierced through the darkness, striking the King of Shadows with devastating force. The explosion of light engulfed the battlefield, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Shadows wreathed and shrieked, the darkness fracturing as the beam of light tore through the king's essence. A roar of agony echoed through the air as the King of Shadows was engulfed in a brilliant blaze of light, its form disintegrating into nothingness. But as the dust settled and silence descended, Cyrus felt a chill race down his spine. The darkness had not been vanquished. It had merely retreated, waiting for another opportunity to strike. He exchanged worried glances with his comrades, their expressions reflecting the weight of the battle they had just fought. "We have won this battle," Alara said, her voice shaky but filled with determination. "But we must remain vigilant. The primordials will return." Cyrus nodded, his heart heavy with the realization that their fight was far from over. "We will be ready. Together, we will face whatever darkness comes our way." As the dawn broke over the battlefield, casting warm light across the land, the Guardians took a moment to catch their breath. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but the war was not yet over. Shadows lingered at the edges of their vision, and Cyrus knew they would need to prepare for the battles that lay ahead. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette standing against the rising sun. It was tall and imposing, cloaked in darkness, and Cyrus felt his heart race at the sight of it. "You may have won this time," the figure said, its voice cold and mocking, "but you are merely delaying the inevitable. The darkness will rise again, and you will not be able to stop it." Cyrus's heart sank as he realized who stood before them: the Prince of Vorak, the chosen one destined to inherit the legacy of darkness. His eyes burned with an otherworldly light, a flicker of both ambition and malevolence. "You may have defeated the king, but the shadows will always find a way back," the prince continued, a sly smile creeping across his lips. "I will ensure that you pay for your defiance. The primordials will return, and I will be their harbinger." As the prince's words echoed through the air, Cyrus felt the weight of despair settle over him once more. They had fought bravely, but the shadows were far from extinguished. The battle had only just begun, and now, with the Prince of Vorak lurking in the darkness, their fight for light would only grow more perilous. "Prepare yourselves," the prince warned, his voice dripping with malice. "For the darkness will rise again, and when it does, you will find yourselves alone in the shadows." With that, the prince dissolved into the darkness, leaving the Guardians with the chilling knowledge that their fight against the shadows was far from over. Cyrus turned to his comrades, their faces set in determination, and he knew they would not back down. "Together," he said, his voice strong and unwavering, "we will face whatever challenges come our way. We will fight for the light, for our world, and for each other. This is not the end, it is only the beginning." As the sun rose higher in the sky, illuminating the battlefield with its golden light, the Guardians stood resolute, ready to face whatever darkness awaited them. The shadows lingered, but they would not falter. They were the Guardians of Light, and they would rise to meet the challenges that lay ahead. The battle may have been won, but the war against darkness was just beginning. And as they prepared to face the future, Cyrus could feel the weight of the shadows still pressing upon them, a reminder that true darkness never truly fades. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey through darkness and light. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels our passion to bring more chilling tales to life. Together, let's dive deeper into the shadows and uncover the secrets that lie within. Until next time, keep your lights on and your hearts brave. There's always more to discover. Stay tuned.